When people think of movie licensed games, they probably think of some low effort slop, churned out by uninterested devs who didn't really care enough to make a decent game. And one can't really blame them, considering some of the not so great games that have come out over the years. Some of these hold the illustrious spots as some of the worst gaming has to offer, with repetitive and mundane gameplay, as well as lackluster stories carrying them to the lowest rungs of our society. It's to the point where very few movie games, if any, are even being made anymore. They're seen as a relic of a bygone age, too much trouble than they're worth in a saturated market that demands more and more from even the B-tier productions. But were things always so bleak? Did movie games always suck so much that people would rather avoid them altogether? Nay, my humble viewer. There was a time, not long ago, when some of the very best gaming had to offer were movie games, and I'm going to take you back there to reminisce a bit. Let's take a look at the golden age of movie tie-ins together. Remember when there was only one Spongebob movie? Yeah, me neither. But there was a time, many moons ago, where the yellow guy had only one foray onto the big screen, so the creators of the original Battle for Bikini Bottom, Heavy Iron Studios, were approached with a proposal to create a direct tie-in game just for this momentous occasion.
Get a hold of yourself, Eugene.
The result? A fairly enjoyable platformer that followed faithfully the events of the film and let you crash the paddy wagon to your heart's content and explore the depths. Lots of cute references to the source material are abound, as you might expect, and each level is carefully sourced from the world it belongs to, from the goofy goober parlor all the way to Shell City. Some people even liked it better than their previous game, citing the more linear structure and unlockables allowing for more coherence. Though obviously this game owes a lot to Battle for Bikini Bottom, borrowing plenty of models, animations, and assets that the devs were able to touch up and bring more in line with the movie. If you liked Battle for Bikini Bottom, Cosmic Shake, or more recently Titans of the Tide, think of this as another game in that same family line. Only at the time, we had no idea that there would be more, so we just assumed this would be the last of the bunch. Little did we know, a bunch of nostalgia bros would be clamoring for more nearly 20 years later. It suffers from a lot of the same problems as Battle for Bikini Bottom, of course, like audio spam and strange volume mixing, and is even weirdly difficult at times, but as a platformer, switching between Spongebob and Patrick, it does fairly well for itself with all of the new challenges and bosses it throws your way to nab up those tokens. And of course, one would be remiss to not mention the driving and sliding levels peppered all throughout the game. They provide an interesting break in the usual gameplay, with carefully crafted turns, pitfalls, and traps layered all over the roads and bridges. You can even come back later to do time trials and ring challenges if you're so inclined. All in all, it's a fun time, exactly what it should be, and any game that lets you fight on David Hasselhoff has to be at least decent.
Batman's coming.
Boy, talk about total whiplash, huh? Some of you out there may be too young to remember just how hype this game was. But let me tell you something, folks. Before the likes of the Arkham series, this was the premier Batman gaming experience. Cool gadgets, fun combat, good voice acting, and even a fear mechanic that you could use to scare your superstitious, dumb-as-bricks enemies. It's clear the devs over at Eurocom really poured their hearts into this one, and were probably big fans of the Caped Crusader themselves. Though, isn't almost everybody? It even had Tumblr Batmobile levels that you could play through, and this was back before people didn't arbitrarily hate playing through Batmobile sections. Though somehow we're supposed to believe pancaking all those cars is causing no fatalities or serious injuries. I think Bruce just programmed his AI computer to comfort him with lies about how everyone is fine. Now obviously being a tie-in game, this follows the story of our Christopher Nolan Bale Bat, starting off his crime-fighting legacy and eventually saving his city from the crazy people out to destroy it. You start out learning the secrets of ninjahood and the League of Shadows, only to become the spirit of Gotham's vengeance. And it's pretty cool. The levels are well designed, lending to that nasty, gritty vibe that Gotham needs to feel like the Chicago/Detroit stand-in it truly is. The thugs are dirty, the streets are dirty, even the cops are dirty. and Batman has to clean it all up or end up in the nut house. Which you also go to, by the way, as any good Batman story eventually does. Arkham is basically a bug light to the city's wackos. Now the core gameplay is fairly simple action-adventure style, split into a more typical combat puzzle sections and more stealth-based sections, not unlike the aforementioned Arkham games. I mean, it is Batman, stealth is kind of his thing, and Bats is smart enough not to charge at fully armed goons, which makes him smarter than me. Now the puzzle sections are admittedly pretty simple, oftentimes, but as a superhero game I can see how it is trying to be accessible to a wide audience, so I have to forgive it on that front. The combat too, fairly simple in its combinations of punching and kicking, but the addition of the fear mechanic allows you to utilize gadgets to stun or mess with your enemies when they're sufficiently freaked out. I always wished other games could utilize mechanics like this, especially when you go to finish a thug and they're so scared they just see Bats as a literal demon. God, that's sick. And remember how I mentioned the voice acting? Now obviously you've got Christian Bale as our hero, debatably doing an even better job than he did in the movie. Just listen to him interrogate those thugs.
Unless he was what? Scared.
Calm down, Bruce, for God's sake. You've also got Michael Caine as our man in the chair, giving us directions through nearly each and every level, and sassing us at every possible moment, just to really knock Bruce down back to earth.
Alfred, are you still alive?
No, sir, but loyal as always.
Cheeky butler. It's a wonder Bats doesn't dock his pay. And our villain, Ra's al Ghul, is played by none other than Liam Neeson, who is sometimes so quiet I can barely hear him.
My name is Ra's al Ghul.
But I guess that's the ninja training coming out. Katie Holmes reprises her role as Rachel Dawes, also known as Bruce's love interest and future Scientology convert. Honestly, I think she handles the recording booth better than Neeson does, bless her.
Bruce?
And somehow, they managed to get Lucius Fox himself, Morgan frickin' Freeman. I don't know what boatload of money they paid this man to be in like 2 scenes of this game, but I was literally shocked to hear his actual voice come out of his character model.
That doesn't make any sense. The toxins and inhalant. Putting it in the water wouldn't work.
I'm pretty sure this is one of like only 2 video game roles he's ever done. Kudos to everybody for making this happen. It's just a shame they had to cancel the Dark Knight game before it could release. Between the development hell it was stuck in and the Heath Ledger incident, it's no wonder why it failed to release, but man, they could have really had some gold on their hands. But hey, this game stands on its own well enough as the pinnacle of 3D Batman action of its day. Now this one is kind of a given, as many of you would probably think of these two right off the top, but it would be wrong not to include them. I'm sort of bunching Two Towers and Return of the King together here because of their incredibly similar gameplay and presentation, so please don't crucify me over not going over them individually. Alas, I am but one man, and I can only gush so much. Now obviously, unless you've been living under a rock, you'll probably be familiar with the movies that these are based on, and both Stormfront Studios and EA Redwood Shores did an amazing job painstakingly recreating both the feeling and look of the trilogy. Sometimes even taking the shot from the film and blending it into their rendered cutscene, like the true nerds they are. Two Towers follows a linear path of levels from the beginning of the first movie all the way up to that final climactic battle at Helm's Deep, allowing you to play through each level as either Aragorn, Legolas, or Gimli. Now obviously, as a kid, I always went for Legolas. For one, he was cool and had way more arrows than the other two. Who wouldn't want to play as the godly archer who can hit everything? And as an adult, yeah, I still choose Legolas. Elf supremacy reigns, fight me. From the mines of Moria to the Battle of Amon Hen, there are plenty of chances to show off the pure combat this game indulges in. Light attacks, heavy attacks, combos, arrows, there's plenty here to send the Uruks flying. There's no puzzles, there's no stealth, it's all combat all the time. One might think it might get boring after a while, but somehow the set pieces and cutscenes, combined with the world of Peter Jackson and Tolkien, make it far more engaging than one could ever expect. By the end, you're left scratching your head, wondering how they managed to pull it off. And of course, Return of the King offers much the same, starting off right where the last game left off. Only this time, instead of the usual linear level select, it offers 3 story paths to play through in order to best the game. Each path follows its own key characters. The Path of the Wizard, where you play as Gandalf and unleash plenty of spells on unsuspecting orcs. The Path of the Hobbits, where you play as Sam trying to keep Frodo from wandering off a cliff. And The Path of the King, with the usual 3 heroes trying to aura farm as hard as they can. The addition of new playable characters, especially my man Gandalf, feels like a welcome improvement, and the new engine this game sports allows even more enemies to be on screen at once. You never really know fear until you see Pelennor Fields covered in enemies, and you have to keep your allies alive from an angry Witch King. And of course, I have to mention the rating system these games sport, ranking each and every Uruk takedown you get from fair all the way up to perfect, and each level is ranked as such depending on how many you get of each. This DMC-style system incentivizes the player to replay each level to try and get that triple S perfect score, whether by mixing up their combos or by simply spamming until they fill up the perfect meters all the way. Is it simplistic? Sure. Is it badass? Absolutely. These 2 games have had an unconscionable amount of hours sucked out of me back in the day, and I don't regret a moment of it. I mean, everybody knew these were coming, right? It almost goes without saying. For many people, when it comes to superhero games in general, Spider-Man 2 was the king for many years. You couldn't even have a discussion online on which was best without somebody popping up to say, nah, Spider-Man 2 was better. And really, I can see why. Treyarch did what few others could do, especially in a 3D space, giving us genuinely fun web-slinging action while following the stories laid out in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. Now, why am I including Spider-Man 1 here? Well, sometimes I feel like the first one gets overlooked in favor of its more successful and praised sequel. Don't get me wrong, 2 is the king, but that makes 1 the prince in my book. So what makes these games great? Or one might say, spectacular? I'll stop. Let's start with the first game. While fairly linear in design, moving from one level to the next, Spider-Man 1 does a great job of making each level feel large and sprawling. There's plenty of room for Peter to zip around and swing, giving the player the feeling of freedom despite the confined nature of a non-sandbox environment. It's great sleight of hand. It has all the gameplay you'd expect from Spidey, webbing up enemies and unleashing acrobatic attacks that you unlock along your journey. Though personally, I ended up only using a handful. Some are just way more useful than others. There's also a surprising level of enemy variety in this game. You'd assume, based on the movie, that there'd probably be some assortment of thugs and then Green Gobbo himself. And yes, those are both definitely present. However, that only scratches the surface. You've got robotic spiders that cling to walls and zip around, flying drones that pelt you with lasers, big Assaultron-looking combat mechs that roam Oscorp as security, and plenty of villains beside our main man Defoe. Scorpion, Shocker, Vulture. Somehow they managed to squeeze all these guys in here while feeling completely natural to the flow of the game. It gives Spidey a progression of his journey, to where fighting a guy roided out on super soldier juice at the end feels warranted because he's fought through all these other weirdos to get here. Plus, their fights are all fun and varied in their approach. Vulture is a strict air battle, which makes sense. Shocker's fight is confined to a subway, making it claustrophobic and suited to his powers. And Scorpion is a paranoid freak who attacks you because you looked at him funny. So, you know, typical New Yorker. Of course, Tobey Maguire is here reprising his role as Spidey, but I have to admit, he doesn't quite nail the delivery on some of these lines. I feel like it took him a game to really figure out how to put some zhuzh into his performance. So by Spider-Man 2, he's much improved. Still, he's serviceable at least.
That was just plain rude.
And, as if that wasn't enough, there's even an unlockable mode where you can play as Harry Osborn in the Green Goblin suit that has additional voice acting and everything. You can fly around on the glider and terrorize thugs with razor bats to your heart's content, all while Harry exposits about trying to figure out the truth about his father. They didn't have to do all that, but they did, and it is dope. Okay, I know you all want the main event, so on we go. Spider-Man 2. Where to even begin with this one? For starters, I think it's important to note that unlike the first game, this one is completely open to explore pretty much right from the start. There's no divisions or traditional levels to speak of, it's just a large sandbox of New York for you to swing around in and appreciate. It's still linear, as all games are, but the freedom to take in the city makes it feel much more alive than previous titles where it felt more like a backdrop. And unlike any previous Spider-Man game to date, this one actually went the extra mile to have realistic web-slinging mechanics. What do I mean by that? Well, the game calculates in real time where your web is attached to, how far you are from it, and the trajectory of your swing. Seems simple enough by modern standards, even expected, but at the time this was practically witchcraft. The idea of Spidey actually attaching his webs to specific points on buildings and not just letting you swing from nothing had never really been done before. And man, is it fun. It even lets you do crazy stuff like hitch a ride on a helicopter and just ride it out, assuming you're high enough to not faceplant into a building along the way. In the trite words of every game reviewer, it really makes you feel like Spider-Man. I should also mention the combat, which has somewhat been simplified from the imposing wall of upgrades from the first game, to a handful of flashy and interesting attacks that showcase Spidey's unique fighting style. It makes combat almost a dance, and the different styles of enemies often require different styles of attacks. Also, unlike the first game, there's a larger emphasis on side content in this game scattered throughout the city. Things like random crimes to stop or balloons to rescue, pizzas to deliver for Mr. Aziz, complete with the fever dream music, and of course, hideouts full of thugs to clear out that often have little upgrade point tokens to spend on whatever you want. Oh, and plenty of New Yorkers shouting for Spidey's help, some with interesting voice acting.
Oh, this doesn't look good.
And we have to mention some of the villains you face because there's some real highlights here. Rhino makes a brief appearance as a boss fight, bless his heart, and Shocker shows up yet again as our resident jobber. Poor guy can take a punch, I tell you. But the real shocking highlight is Mysterio. Who expected this guy to get so much screen time? He starts off small and somewhat benign, challenging Spidey to a public farce in an arena, only to escalate to destroying local theaters and attacking the Statue of Liberty. You gotta give the guy credit, he doesn't do half measures. And these are some of the highlights of the game for sheer insanity. Swinging on UFOs to reach Lady Liberty and rescue her? That's peak storytelling. Not to mention his literal house of horrors. I'm not even sure how he built this underneath an apartment building in New York City, but I'm not going to question it because it's peak.
Nuts.
But I think all of that is additional factors to the puzzle on what makes this game special. Surprisingly, playing through it again, I found that what I appreciated most was not how closely it followed the movie, but how it differed. See, one thing both of these games do fairly well is not just follow the plots of the movies they represent, but also add on to that plot with stories of their own, as with Mysterio. Whole new ideas, not present in the movies, that add not just to the runtime, but to the narrative overall. For example, one of the main issues Spidey faces in the movie is a sort of crisis of faith. His desire to live a normal life with MJ makes him lose confidence as Spider-Man, and basically makes him lose his powers for a bit, foregoing his superhero side and just focusing on a normal life. In the game, they explore the opposite idea. Enter Black Cat. She's scandalous and risque, she takes nothing seriously, and despite clearly being on the wrong side of the law, she encourages Peter to live his life his way. She's a bad influence with good intentions, but Peter never brushes her off. She tells him, why should he care about being normal? Maybe he should just forget about all that normie nonsense and be Spider-Man all the time. It's much more fun, right? It's an interesting reversal. And in a game where playing as Peter would be pretty boring, it's a clever way to sidestep that original plot point while retaining the core premise of forsaking one half of yourself to satisfy the other. And of course, Spidey is a good boy deep down, and he can't simply abandon his old life to satisfy himself in some adolescent fantasy. He wants to live in the real world with MJ, thus leading to the climactic resolution of his arc. Really, this game's a masterpiece. It's got some jank and some camp moments, as a lot of games did from this era, but none of that detracts from the overall enjoyment. In fact, some of the camp feels right at home in a game based off a Sam Raimi production.
What? Get out of here, you maniacs!
If you haven't played any of these games, or have written off all movie games as trash, I hope I've at least elucidated you on some of the best on offer, and shown you that some can actually be great. And that, my friends, is the end of our little trip down memory lane. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope one day you'll join me in praying for the return of good movie games like those of yesteryear. Once again, my name is Caleb for Fusspot Gaming, and I'm gonna go order a pizza. Ciao!